Good afternoon, everybody. This is Paul Reyes with Common Look, and I just want to thank you for joining in to today's webinar as we talk about tagging in PDF, verification of correct tag use, and check out some common mistakes that often happen. First of all, you should be able to hear me okay, hopefully, but you're on mute. So if you're trying to communicate with us, if you're having technical issues with the Zoom platform, for example, and you need urgent attention, please use the chat window to post your technical questions there. And then if you have a question about the content of today's webinar, please feel free to put that in the Q&A pod, and we'll check those at the end and answer any questions that are there. Also, by the way, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a captioned recording to everybody who has registered for today's webinar. So be on the lookout for that, right? Give us a couple days or so to get the captioning taken care of, but then we will be sending that on over to you. So we're going to talk today about tagging in PDFs and some common mistakes that can happen and things to be watching out for. We'll also touch on what automation can and can't accurately do when it comes to tagging PDF. And we'll actually do it. We'll tag a document and check out some of the real world scenarios for what happens when we do that. And then we'll kind of recap, hit some details that maybe didn't come up during the actual demonstration in the PDF itself. And of course, hopefully leave time at the end to entertain questions and so on. So again, please use the Q&A pod for your questions about today's presentation. So first of all, a really important thing to keep in mind when it comes to PDF accessibility and tagging is that, yes, tags are needed in a PDF for it to be accessible, but just because a PDF has tags doesn't mean it's really fully accessible, doesn't mean that it's standards compliant, doesn't mean that it's necessarily even usable, right? So we need to go beyond just making sure that tags are there. Of course, that is an important step in PDF accessibility. So how can the tags get there, right? The tags can get into the PDF, if you will, from the source application, whatever you're using to create your document, whether that's Word or InDesign or whatever. Tags can come from those places. And also tags can be added in Acrobat. You can either manually tag the content in a PDF in Acrobat, or you can just do it automatically and have Acrobat take care of it for you. Of course, as I mentioned, the presence of tags is the bare minimum. So however the tags get there, still probably gonna, well, you're definitely gonna have to verify them and probably gonna have to do some touch-up remediation work as well. Right, so we'll take a quick little overview of tagging first, and then we'll actually tag up a PDF and look at some specific situations that come up. So first of all, it's important to keep in mind that the correct tags need to be used for the content, right? Just because tags are there doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, and the PDF accessibility standards are pretty clear that the most semantically appropriate tag needs to be used for content. So for example, if you're just putting everything in the page into paragraph tags, that's not okay, right? We probably need to use headings and perhaps lists and so on as well. It's important to keep in mind that different tags have different rules for how they can be used, how they need to be put together or constructed, nesting rules and so on, like what tags can go inside other tags or can't go inside other tags and so on, right? Especially nesting rules when it comes to things like tables, lists, tables of contents, links and forms and so on. right? It's also important to keep in mind that the tags need to be in the correct reading order. Now, last week we did a webinar on reading order. So if you missed that one, feel free to shoot us an email at sales@commonlook.com and they can provide that to you. Of course, if you registered for it last week, then I would imagine you probably got the recording of it, or it'll be on its way soon, again, after it's done being captioned and so on. So anyway, also we need to keep in mind that certain tags need other attributes applied to them. For example, when it comes to images that go in figure tags, they need to have alternative text, right? There are other tags that need other things too, but that's just a quick example. So when it comes to automation, right, there's various tools out there for automatically tagging PDFs. So what can automation do? And it's important to keep in mind when I'm talking about what automation can and can't do, that different tools you know, have different functionalities, and some of this may vary from tool to tool, but this is kind of a general list of things that you know, they can do fairly well. And then maybe some things to at least keep your eyes open for, and maybe you have to verify whether or not some of these things are correct. So when it comes to automatically tagging a PDF, what are some of the things that automation can do? Well, it can tag a PDF, right? Can add tags to the document. Various applications will keep in mind the nesting rules for certain tags. So for example, we're gonna tag a PDF using Acrobat, and Acrobat knows that that list item tags can't be at the root level. They have to be inside a list tag, right? So it's going to keep in mind, automation will keep in mind some of those nesting rules, right? They can tag up basic table structure sometimes fairly well. Of course, as tables get more complex, then that becomes harder, right? And tagging basic lists and so on, at least sometimes they can get that right. And noticing things like there's object references or annotations, putting those in link tags or maybe in form tags if it's a widget annotation. So sometimes automation can do that, sometimes better than others, and so on. Generally speaking, things that automation can't necessarily always do is always get the most semantically appropriate tag for the content, right? It's taking its cues, if you will, from the encoding of the PDF, wherever it came from and whatever, and sometimes it's going to get it right, sometimes it's not. So you're certainly going to have to check that. Sometimes it'll get the nesting right, but sometimes it won't. So you're going to have to check out, you know, whether or not the tags are constructed and nested correctly as well. Tables, they have a harder time. Automation will have a harder time correctly identifying where the table headers are, the TH cells, and assigning the proper scope, whether that's column header or a row header, for example. And sometimes getting the cell span correct can be difficult for automated taggers as well, right? If a cell is spanning multiple columns or multiple rows, for example. Also, when it comes to complex tables, data cells have to be linked to their header cells based on IDs and so on. And automation has a really hard time doing that correctly automatically, right? Usually there's some touch-up, at least some touch-up that's going to need to be done. Right, providing alternative text for things like figures and links proves to be problematic for most auto taggers. It'll notice that there's an image, put it in a figure tag, but not necessarily be able to assign the alternative text for that figure tag. And then, of course, properly tagging form annotations. Sometimes that can be tricky, where the form annotations will get lumped in with other tags that they actually shouldn't have been there. So just some of the things to keep in mind that you might have to check while you are, you know, automatically adding tags to a document. So let's take a look, right? Let's run a PDF through its paces and see how it actually does, right? So I'll navigate to this PDF that I have open in Adobe Acrobat, and currently there are no tags available right? If I navigate over to the tools and check the tags, there's no tags available. So I'm just going to auto tag this. Now, again, I could take the time to, open up the accessibility window over on the other side of Acrobat and the reading order tool and manually tag it all. But I'm going to use the automated features of just adding tags to the document. So we'll let Acrobat do its thing, and then we'll navigate back to the tag tree, and sure enough, here's tags, right? So great, there they are. Then the next step really is to make sure that the correct tags are being used for the content and they're in the correct reading order and so on. Now, I know, and we're going to get into other technical webinars here in the upcoming weeks. For example, next week, I'm sure this is going to raise some eyebrows, we're going to deal with data tables, right, including complex data tables. So not going to necessarily get into the, how to fix all of this right now, but certainly the approach that I take and that we train at Common Look when we're teaching people how to do PDF remediation, and what our remediation services people do is we check the tags first, navigating through the tags, making sure that the correct tag is used for the content, making sure the reading order is good, and then run our verification. Right now, I know that many people have the workflow of once the PDF has tags, go over to the accessibility checker in Acrobat and see what comes up and go fix those things and then test it again and so on. At Common Look, we think our approach is a little bit more efficient, a little more effective, a little less frustrating. So that's why we do what we do. So we're going to navigate through the tags and we're going to check and see how did the auto tagging in Acrobat do. So first of all, I've got a paragraph tag for really what's the title of my document, right? Now it came up last week when we were talking about reading order. I think there was a question about, hey, can there be a webinar on heading levels and titles and so on and so forth? So I think Sales has already made a note of that. I'll put up a link to our webinar schedule later, and you can check and see if and when. Pretty sure we are going to do a webinar on heading levels and so on. But anyways, we would want probably our title to be in an H1, not a paragraph tag. So yes, it tagged it. The reading order was good. I would expect that to come first, but the tag type, a little bit suspect. And then there's a paragraph tag for table of contents. Again, I would probably put that in an H2, for example. There's a figure tag for the image, but we can check and notice that, as predicted, there's no alternative text. So somebody using a screen reader would hear graphic, but then they wouldn't know what it's a picture of. Now, that brings up another interesting point. Is this the photograph of a bee at a flower? Is it conveying any important information or not? Because if it's not, then we could argue to artifact that, so that it's not, so that that image isn't wasting a screen reader user's time, because it's not conveying anything important, right? But anyway, continuing on, we have a table of contents tag now, TOC. And when I select it, it's highlighting the table of contents, which is good, right? But we'll go ahead and open that up. And when I look in the physical view at the table of contents, I see there's kind of root level headings, and then there's indented sections as well. So I would expect there to be nested tables of contents as well. But in the table of contents, all of the TOCIs are at the same level, right? So structurally, that's not quite correct. Also, and I'm not going to open up every single table of content item, but when I open up the first one, I see a link tag inside, but seeing as this is a link to an internal location somewhere else in this document, really there should be a reference tag first. Then we have our link tag. The object reference is there. That's the annotation. That's the clickable part to take me to the correct page. And then we have TOCI title, which in this case is the word beekeeping, and then TOCI leader and all of the dots, right? So depending on what screen reader you're using and how it handles this tag and so on and so forth, the screen reader user could literally get beekeeping, ... and then finally page 1, right? Or for example, some screen readers will say the title or the text, so beekeeping, and then just tell you how many dots there are, and then the page number. Either way, we don't really need the dots to be tagged. Could be annoying or worse for somebody to be listening to. Continuing on through the tag tree, and I'm not going to go through every single tag here, but just really quickly checking things like reading order and so on. We have a paragraph for beekeeping, and then there's a paragraph about beekeeping. Now, I also notice as I go across the page break, and that paragraph does, so that's correct, but there's actually a footnote. There's a superscript 1 here, and if I scroll down, there's a footnote at the bottom of the page. So that paragraph tag that is underneath the heading, what should have been a heading for beekeeping, I want to check and make sure that that has a reference tag for my footnote, which it doesn't. So we're going to have another webinar, I think, on footnotes and how to tag those. So tune in for that, but this isn't quite done correctly. Then we have, I'm going to leave this paragraph tag open because I want it as a landmark, because what I would have expected is to have the footnote come next because it relates to that section, but instead it's going to go to the next section on the page, why raise bees and the benefits of beekeeping and so on. So reading order is a little bit suspect here. Our first heading in the document is actually an H3, so that would certainly need to be addressed as well. And then there's part tags and section tags and so on as well, which, you know, some of you who have done PDF remediation know that these can be a little bit annoying to have to dig into various parts and sections and so on. So they're actually not needed. Assistive technology doesn't do anything with them. So we really don't need them. They can be kind of annoying, like I said, when you're trying to remediate a document. Continuing on, we've got another H3 for benefits of beekeeping. I would argue if why raise bees is going to be an H3, then the benefits of beekeeping might be an H4. But anyway, there's a paragraph tag, and then there's a list. So let's check this list, and we'll open it up. We'll see that there's list items with labels and L bodies. So that's actually a good example. That was done correctly, right? So I'm not going to open up every single list item, but again, for the second one, we have the label and the L body as well. So the list was done correctly. And then, of course, we have our paragraph tag, which is the footnote, which really should have been placed further up in the reading order. So I would want to touch that up if I was remediating this document, and not only move that tag up to closer to where it's actually being referred to, but I would also put it into a note tag and so on as well. But again, we're going to get into tagging footnotes in a future webinar. My next H3, again, challenges to beekeeping here. I would argue that should be an H4, then maybe in the section, you know, about beekeeping and so on. Then a paragraph. There's another list. I'm just going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard. So there's the list item with the label and the L body again. So we're actually good with that list. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and continue on. So the H3 then, so we have the heading and then paragraphs. Now what's interesting about this next paragraph tag is it actually contains what I would expect. So threats to bee survival, right? Then we have diseases and then parasites and so on. But diseases is lumped into the paragraph tag that contains the text about diseases, right? So clearly that's a reading order tag type issue that would need to be fixed. And then the next paragraph, again, next paragraph tag, parasites and so on. I'm also noticing there's a superscript 2 and expecting to see a footnote come up. However, that footnote is actually being referred to twice. So I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be in the reading order right after the first time that it comes up. But we'll continue on. So we've got a couple more paragraph tags and so on. And then where the footnote is being referred to. I'm going to open this up just to keep it as a landmark because, kind of spoiler alert, I know what's about to happen. I would expect maybe the next paragraph tag to be the footnote, seeing as it's the next thing on the page. But in fact, it's jumping in the reading order, right? And just to be clear, in case you missed last week's webinar on reading order, the reading order in a PDF for accessibility is determined by the order of the tags. Again, shoot us an email if you didn't get the recording for last week's reading order, if you would like more clarification on that. So, but we have another heading that's lumped in with a paragraph of text. That's not correct. and then another what should be a heading in a paragraph tag. Again, there's a figure tag without alternative text, so something that would need to be touched up as well. And another paragraph, and then here's a table caption. It says table 1, and then the text about what's going on in the table below it. So put it in a paragraph tag. We would want that to be a caption tag. And then speaking of nesting rules, caption tags for tables go inside the table itself. We do have a table tag next, so that's good. But if we open it up, we're going to notice the table rows. So again, good construction here, but then TDs going across the top row, where these are really my column headers for the table. And I can see that there are 5 TDs in this top row. The second row only has 3 data cells in it, 2 of which are empty, and then 1 has the kind of subheader, if you will, that's centered in the table in the second row down. And then we get into the actual data cells and so on, going across for various countries and so on, right? Again, we're doing a webinar next week on tables. Maybe we'll come back to this one and tag it up correctly. But at any rate, we need header cells for our column headers and for our row headers, for example, going down the left-hand side, Germany, Serbia, Denmark, and so on, would need to be tagged as row headers, which we don't have any of that going on in our table. So that table clearly needs some work. And of course, it spans across the page break as well, and the column headers have been tagged again on the second page of that table, which when you have a table that spans across a page break like that, you don't want your column headers being repeated again partway through your table and stuff like that. So that would need to be addressed in the table tagging. Continuing on though, we get down to the text below the table. So reading order was good, except for now the paragraph tag after the source for that table information. The next paragraph tag is actually taking me back to page 4 at the bottom of the page where the footnote is, right? Which I left the paragraph tag open further up in the tag tree to see we're kind of a ways away from where ideally we wanted that, what should have been a note tag, to be. So the reading order is not quite awesome there either and would need to be fixed. Continuing on then, we've got a next H3 and then a paragraph tag. That's fine, I suppose. My next heading 3 has review questions, but it's also highlighting actually the first form annotation. There's 2 questions here, and the first form annotation is actually in with the H3. So we would want to fix that from a tagging standpoint. I would want the form field to be with the text label, right, asking what the scientific name for beekeeping is, for example. And then the next paragraph tag in the tag tree actually has the text for the first question, the text for the second question, and the annotation, again, the second text field for the second question. So clearly, some touch-up would need to be done there as well. Then finally, at the bottom of the last page, here's a heading for resources, and then visually, I'm looking at a list with two links, right? So I should see a list tag next in the tag tree, but in fact, there's 2 paragraph tags. So here's a situation where a list was not tagged properly, and then if I open these, there's a style span tag, which has inside it the link tag with the object reference and the hyperlinked text. So that's good link tag construction, except it doesn't necessarily need to be inside the style span tag. However, link tags need alternative text, and there isn't any on the link tag either. So that would be something that a remediator would have to address. And similarly, the last link, now in the physical view, it's actually a link on 2 lines, right? It's 2 lines long. And in the tag tree, there's 2 separate link tags. So from a tagging standpoint, if you've got a link that spans 2 lines of text, you would want 1 link tag. Of course, there are 2 link annotations there, the object reference, OBJR, but they would both need to be in the same link tag because they're basically both going to the same place. So those links aren't quite handled correctly from a tagging standpoint. So yes, the tags are there, but no, they're not great, and certainly some remediation work would need to be done, right? Whether you're doing that in Acrobat, you're using Common Look, however you're going about it, there's certainly some touch-up that would need to take place, right? So that was just kind of a quick overview. Again, today is not all about how to tag all of those various things, because we have 45 minutes and it might take a little longer to explain that stuff and verify it and all of that as well. But let's recap some of the things that we saw, right? First of all, when it comes to grouping tags, right? Not that it's wrong, but we don't necessarily need article tags and part, div, and sect tags, right? Now, sometimes you might need an article tag depending on what's appropriate for your document. But generally speaking, these tags, these grouping tags get put in, and again, generally speaking, they're not really needed, right? Also, some, we didn't see it in this table, but we will sometimes see T-head, T-body, and T-foot tags coming into tables. And again, they're not really wrong depending on how they've been handled, but they're not necessarily really needed either, seeing as assistive technology doesn't really do anything with them, right? So things, kind of generally speaking, things to keep in mind, be on the lookout for. Make sure that hidden content either is tagged if it needs to be, or isn't tagged if it doesn't need to be, right? Ideally, don't hide content, but sometimes various people have reasons for doing that. Make sure that decorative elements are tagged or not tagged, right? Or things to watch out for when decorative elements are tagged, right? When they shouldn't be, or vice versa, real content, stuff that's conveying important information, is not tagged, right? So make sure that, that everything that is conveying important information has been tagged, and if it's decorative, it's not tagged. Right? Running headers and footers, for example, according to PDF specifications, should be artifacted or untagged as well. Now, there's a judgment call there that comes into play. You probably want your header information and your footer information that you have in the document read once, so then you have to make the decision on when to have that happen. But generally speaking, when a footer page numbers, for example, repeat on every page, those need to be untagged or artifacted. Also want to check and make sure that the most semantically appropriate tags for the content are being used, and that the reading order is correct, and a screen reader is not going to be making somebody jump from page to page all over the place in the document. That somebody looking at the document gets the content in the same order, and that the tag tree is delivering that to somebody who's using assistive technologies like screen readers, refreshable braille displays, and so on. So some specific cases that we saw. Images. Do you artifact them or not? Depends on whether or not they convey important information, right? Also keep in mind that given the current PDF standard that's out and supported and so on, if you have a decorative image, using the artifact tag is not actually the way to handle that, right? It would be placed in an artifact container, but on the untagged side of things, if you will, as opposed to being in the tag tree. If you have images that convey important information, you'll need to provide alternative text. Of course, we could put important information in air quotes as well, and given the requirements of your organization, I know some organizations have the rule that if it's an image on the page, it gets tagged and it gets alternative text, right? So sometimes that can take the guesswork out of, does this convey anything important or not? But if images do convey important information, then they certainly need to be tagged in figure tags and provided the accurate alternative text. And when it comes to images, which we didn't see in today's example, but have captions been handled correctly as well? Don't put caption tags inside figure tags, for example, because when a figure tag has alternative text, that's the only thing that gets read and not the information in the caption. Tables of contents, right? Some of the things that we saw, check for proper structure, making sure that You've got your table of contents tag, TOCIs, and then your reference tags, and then possibly link tags if there's linked annotations there, if the table of contents is actually linked to pages in the document. Make sure that the dot leaders are not tagged, right? Artifact those so that a screen reader is not saying dot multiple times or telling you how many dots there are, because you don't need to necessarily know that. And make sure that the nested table of contents tags are children of the TOCI tags, making sure that the nesting is done correctly. We actually have a webinar in the future on lists and table of contents as well. We'll dive into this in more detail during that webinar. Speaking of lists, make sure that the lists are properly structured with a list items, labels, and L bodies, right? And then what to do with nested lists. Make sure that they are inside the parent L body, right? And also important to keep in mind, oftentimes authors will number their headings. Easy to do in Word, for example, and then when you remove a section, conveniently the sections all renumber themselves. But we want to make sure that these numbered headings aren't getting tagged as lists, right? It's really just a heading 2 or heading 3 or whatever the case might be for your content. But don't tag your numbered headings necessarily as lists. Tables can be problematic, right? We want to check to make sure that the structure is correct and that they're regularly shaped. So in other words, are there the correct number of cells per row when you account for row span and column span and so on, right? Also, very likely that in a PDF, if you're auto tagging a table, you would need to check and make sure that things were done correctly. For example, when people use tables in the document at the source to help with the layout, you want to make sure that that's not being tagged as a table in the PDF so that somebody's not being told there's a table when there really isn't one. Meanwhile, when you have data tables, you want to make sure that THs, table header cells, are being used correctly. They have the proper scope. They have IDs when it comes to complex tables. And again, with complex tables, that the associations are made between the data cells and the table header cell IDs, right? Again, make sure that when you've got tables that are spanning multiple pages, things are happening like the column headers are not being re-tagged as they visually repeat on the page. And again, what to do with your table captions, making sure that unlike figure captions, the table caption tags would go inside table tag. Right, again, we're going to cover that and show you what I'm talking about when we do our table webinar next week. Forms, have they been tagged correctly, right? The form tag containing the annotation, whether that's a text field or a checkbox or whatever, and the text label, right? You'll need to provide tooltips as well for the annotations so that when somebody is using, for example, a screen reader, they know what the question is that they're being asked because the screen reader will read the tooltip. Also, for forms, you want to make sure that the tab order is set to follow the order of the tags, right? The standard says to follow the document structure, which is defined by the order of the tags in the tag tree. Similarly, for links, are they properly tagged with the text and the annotation inside a link tag? And then are you handling your links that maybe are on 2 lines correctly, right? Both annotations inside one link tag and so on. Again, links need alternative text, and just like with forms, if you have forms and or links in your document, then the tab order needs to be set to follow the document structure, or again, follow the tags. So at this point, it's kind of a quick overview of some auto tagging and things that can come up. Again, we're going to touch on more in-depth how to fix these things in subsequent webinars coming up, but I'm going to go ahead and pop over to the Q&A pod, see what questions have come in, and I see that there's a bunch, but before I do, just a quick reminder, we will email you a link of the captioned recording of the webinar to you, so be on the lookout for that. If you want to know what other webinars we have coming up in the series, please visit our website, The URL is https://commonlook.com/spring-2020-webinar-series. If you have any questions, comments, I see right now in the Q&A pod, there's 23 comments or questions on. If we run out of time and we don't get to your questions today, or if you think of something after the fact, please feel free to reach out to us at sales@commonlook.com, and we will make sure that your questions, your comments get addressed. All right, so with that, going to the Q&A pod, right, starting at the top, if a Word document has been run through CommonLook Office and a CommonLook PDF created, does the PDF then need to have the tags rechecked? That's a good question. I would suggest doing it just to be safe, right? And the reason being is it's possible to force, with bad authoring, it's possible to force mistakes to be made in the Word document, and as a result in the PDF. For example, when you're placing images into your Word document, you want to place them in line with text, right? That's going to ensure that the reading order is set in the tag tree the way that you had intended, right? However, if you place your image in the Word document and you use some kind of text wrapping, then that puts an anchor somewhere in the PDF, but it may not necessarily happen where you had intended for that image to be read, right? So it's possible to make that happen and to generate the PDF with CommonLook Office. So, you know, along those lines, or for that reason, I would still recommend just checking the tagging to make sure that it's correct. Now, if you're authoring your Word documents with accessibility in mind and you know you're doing everything correctly, then that's the whole point of CommonLook Office, is that then you don't need to do a whole lot of remediation, right? But it can never hurt. Just walk through the tag tree real quick and make sure that everything is in the correct order. Because like I said, it's possible to force mistakes to happen or force bad things to happen. Speaking of tag rules, can a link tag go inside a P tag or should it go below? Actually, so link tags, to not get too technical here, link tags have to go inside some kind of tag like a paragraph or an L body if, you know, it's a link within a list or something like that. So it's actually correct that they go inside a P tag as opposed to just going below, right? What is the correct nesting order for lists? Again, it showed list, list item, label, and L body. So the list tag contains the list items, which contains labels and L bodies. And then if there's a nested list, the L body contains the nested list tag, which then again contains all of its parts. Please feel free to tune in the future. I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head when, but we will be doing a list tagging webinar, and we will show this and how to fix it and so on as needed. Hopefully that helped though. Do digital signatures need to be tagged? After using a digital signature, I'm no longer able to add tags, so I'm unable to tag digital signature. When doing an ADA check, I would receive an error with the check since the digital signature is not tagged. Right, so what you want to do is you want to add the signature field before, right, signing. You want to make sure that it's tagged and all of that stuff before it gets signed, so that after the PDF has been signed, you're right, you can't edit it anymore. So you have to make sure that the accessibility has been taken care of ahead of time. Is the document tag required in PDF remediation? That's a fun and interesting question. The document tag is required when you have a full and complete document. So if you don't have a full and complete document, you would at this point not use a document tag, right? Does assistive technology do anything with it? No, but as per the standards, it's required for full and complete documents. How will you show how to correct the reading order and how to fix tags? Yes, we will. Please check our calendar for the webinars that you think would be useful to you and tune in. When using part and sect or section tags, what's the proper use for them? separating pages, sections, or just keep the tags organized. I never use them personally, and in fact, in Common Look, there's a quick functionality to be able to just flatten tags and push everything out of part, sect, div, and so on tags. They're used solely for the remediator to keep their tags maybe more organized by section, for example, but they're actually not necessary. If a Common Look PDF has been created from a Word document by running the document through Common Look Office, do the tags on the Common Look PDF still need to be checked? That question seems redundant. I feel like I answered before. If you're not clear of the answer, or if you missed it, please shoot us an email at sales@commonlook.com. Happy to discuss. As you move through the tags, how do you get the magenta focus in the actual document? Isn't that a fun trick? It's one of the preferences that you can do. Actually, the way that I got it was because you can do that in Common Look PDF. You can change your highlight color, and conveniently enough, it sticks in Acrobat when you do that. I honestly don't know how to change it just in Acrobat, but I like it. In a list tag, do you have to have labels even if not shown in the document? How do you tag more than one paragraph or heading and paragraph in L body tag? Sure. So first of all, if you don't have labels in the physical view, then your list tag would not have labels either, right? So you would then have list item, and just L body. That's hopefully for the first part. And then how do you tag more than one paragraph or heading and paragraph in an L body tag? Just really quickly, I would question if a heading is really inside an L body or if it really should be structured a different way, right? First of all, does the list cover multiple, through various sections with multiple headings and so on? I would question that. However, in an L body, if you need to include additional paragraph tags or whatever, then you would just have inside your L body, you would have paragraph tags as needed. They can be nested inside L bodies. Continuing, are you going to show us how to fix all of these tag issues? Yes, I will. That's what's coming up in our subsequent webinars. Please feel free to check our schedule. Do all links need alternative text or only those links that are linking URL text? Yes, all link tags need to have alternative text. How do you handle duplicate links on a page? Good question. I might want a little more clarification on that, but if you legitimately have links going, two links in the same page going to the same place, then you would tag them as links. I would maybe want to investigate, are these repetitive navigational links that need to be skipped and so on, and then we would have to handle them perhaps a little bit differently, right? If you need the link available once but not multiple times, then you might need to delete the extra annotations and then perhaps artifact the text because you've made the link available once. Kind of depends on the context of the document. If you'd like more specific information, shoot us an email at sales@commonlook.com. I'm sure it'll get kicked over to me. I would probably respond back asking for, can I see a sample of the document or a screenshot with sensitive stuff blurred out at least, or something like that, so that I can provide guidance. So if you are going to email us, feel free to send a document or, again, screenshots so that I can get better context for your specific scenario. As we move through the tags, how did you get magenta? Thank you, Common Look PDF. I have a link tag and OBJR tag, right? The object reference. Not technically a tag, although the icon is misleading. If my link is Google on the page, should I see etc., the URL in the tag tree for the link? No, you wouldn't. I don't see the link text in any of my link tags, but they do have alt text. Yeah, so the target is assigned to the annotation. You would not see that in the tag tree. What can you say about if I go through a document using the tab key on the keyboard and the tab order is correct? However, when I go through it with a screen reader using the tab key, the tab order is out of the intended navigational order. That's interesting. You've got to make sure that the setting in the PDF is set that the tab order follows the tag tree. because you want to make sure that those are set. And then that would be if the tab order is set to follow the tags and your screen reader is not following that, then you need to contact your screen reader developer and say, hey, this doesn't work according to the standards, because the standards are clear that the tab order needs to follow the tag tree. Hello, I did not get the difference of tagging a decorative image as artifact within the tag structure and outside. I'm not sure how to do that separation. Well, it depends on what software you're using for tagging your document. However, the general concept is if you have a decorative image that's not conveying any important information, then you would not tag it. It would not actually show up in the tag tree, and it would be placed in an artifact container, which doesn't show up in the tag tree. So depending on what software you're using to remediate documents, the functionality can vary. Right? In Common Look, you select it, hit the delete key, and it automatically puts it in an artifact container. In Acrobat, you'd use your reading order tool, for example, and use the background button, and it would artifact it. What's the best way to tag letterhead with lots of persons listed down the left of the document? Can they be tagged as an artifact? Nope, I would not recommend that, because the information at the top, the letterhead, at least on page 1, right? If it repeats on multiple pages, then sure, artifacted on subsequent pages, but probably want to provide the letterhead information at least once in the document. So then it's just up to you to figure out which tag type is the most semantically appropriate for the content. Maybe provide some headings, which provides a little extra navigation to get through the letterhead section maybe a little bit faster. But again, context is everything here. Is there a list of every single possible tag option? Sure, ISO 32000 lists every tag that is available in PDF. What's the best tag reference to better understand all of the tags? Adobe's Docs. You could start there, but again, ISO 32000 lists all of the tags that are available in PDF. Probably not going to use all of them, but that's the standard that introduces the PDF standard. So it talks about tagging and so on. Sometimes a tag is missing for the corresponding text and it doesn't create one with the reading order tool. What can you do? I use Common Look. Yeah, it depends on what tool you're using. I would solve that problem with Common Look because we have ways of doing that. Sometimes you may have to dig into the content in the PDF and maybe it's buried. Maybe that content, for example, is buried inside a Form X object. You might have to manipulate that first. Kind of depends. Feel free to shoot an email at sales@commonlook.com if you've got a specific scenario that you would like some help with, and we can take a look at that. How did you say to tag the title of a table? So for example, in the PDF that I showed, it said table 1, and then there's a description of the table. That would be the caption of the table, and I would put that in a caption tag, and then put that caption tag as the first element inside the table tag, not inside the table row, however. We're going to do tables next week. There'll be more specific information. I'll actually show you doing that next week. Where's the tag for the text associated with a form field go? Is it supposed to be nested in the form field tag? Yes, we do that. So tag, you've got your form tag, contains the text label and the object reference or the annotation, whether it's a text field or a checkbox or whatever. We're working on a webinar coming up on forms, going to get into this maybe a little bit more, but yes, long story short, put the text label that goes with the form field in the form tag with that annotation. How does redactions in a PDF affect accessibility? So good question. When redacted, when content is redacted, it's removed from the PDF and it's replaced with a Form X object. That Form X object would go inside a figure tag, and then that figure tag would need to have alternative text identifying that text has been redacted. if you have a long document with tags jumping around to different sections, can you remove all tags and then retag in hopes of improving the order? Yes, you can. Sometimes it'll work. Sometimes, as we saw in today's example, you can auto tag something and it doesn't necessarily get the reading order right, so you still might have to fix it. But yeah, you can certainly give that a shot. Word to the wise, don't ever work on the original, because if you try that and the reading order for some reason is even worse, you might want to just go back to the original and say, okay, well, I got to fix it, and then go from there. Do reference tags need alternative text? No, reference tags don't necessarily need alternative text, but link tags do. Is there anything I can read up on regarding table of contents before the webinar? Folks are submitting large documents with multiple TOCs and are tagging each with a heading 1 because of formatting issues in Common Look Office in Word. So yeah, in Common Look Office, there's resources about heading 1s and table contents, and you can also, we have information about table contents and headings and styles and so on in our knowledge base. So if you are using Common Look Office, then you have access to our knowledge base, and you'll be able to find a lot of information about table contents there. We're quickly running out of time. If I don't get to your question by the end of this, please feel free to send an email to sales@commonlook.com. I'm going to get through the rest of these as quickly as I can. Our document page numbers artifacts, yes. Is there a way to add languages that are not available? Yes. Long story short, you can. Not necessarily easily in Acrobat, but it can be done. When should the span tag, oops, this just jumped, sorry. I jumped, sorry. When should the span tag be used? There's times when a span tag is great for manipulating how something gets read. If you need to add alternative text or actual text for a symbol, for example, you would use a span tag. There's lots of uses for span tags. I don't have nearly enough time to get into now. Sales@commonlook.com, and we can help you out. How would you tag cross out added content in legislative documents? Yep, that would be a great use for a span tag, actually, because you would need to indicate that you know, struck through text is beginning here and ending there and so on. So you would indicate that you could wrap that text in a span tag and then provide that additional information. Does LI need LBody tag if there's no label? Yes, I'm assuming that if you have LI and LBody that you have a list. So so your list item needs to have an LBody even if there's no label, right? The label would be the bullet or the number or whatever for your list. If there's no labels, your list is still going to have an LBody. Should child of LBody have a P tag? Not necessarily, only if it's needed. What about Adobe's reading order? Does it matter? Craig often messes with the tagging order I've set. True story, that's exactly what we covered in last week's webinar. So please shoot an email to sales@commonlook.com and request the recording for the reading order webinar because we addressed that there. So to be sensitive of people's time, hopefully, I think that's all of the questions. Thank you for tuning in. Again, check our website, the calendar for what the next webinar is and future webinars in our series. If we didn't get your question, if you think of one after the fact, please send an email over to sales@commonlook.com. Thank you very much. Again, this webinar is being recorded. We'll get it captioned and we will get it sent out to you. Thank you very much. Stay healthy, stay safe. Have a great day.